All right, I'm going to stop this now and stop this. That's basically my screensaver on my computer, but I just thought it was cool because it had a bunch of pictures of the Featherweight 221. Obviously some other machines as well, but a lot of pics that I posted on Facebook of the Featherweight 221. And why would I be showing that when we're actually premiering a machine that belongs to Maddy out of Florida that happens to be the big sister to the Featherweight 221, a Singer 301? Well, because there are so many groups of featherweight followers. I would just almost say that they are a nation unto themselves, a featherweight nation. And oftentimes, and I should move away from that very boring screen over to Maddy's machine, which we can look at while I am sharing some thoughts. So they're almost like a nation, right? The featherweight people, the followers of the Featherweight 221, 221-1, 222, etc., etc., etc. And some of them are a little bit on the snobby side, to be honest with you. It's like members only. Do you have a featherweight? Oh, well, not yet. I was thinking about getting one. Go away. When you get one, come back and we'll evaluate your application again. So, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there is an exclusivity to people that either own or move towards buying a featherweight. Even my good friend Hans Christian, who lives in Norway. All of you know Hans by now, for goodness sakes. Well, for the longest time, he was a singular collector of Swedish beauties. That was it. That's pretty much all he had. But a couple of his friends that knew that he was a collector, and maybe they collect as well, I have no idea, but they were like, Hans, you gotta get a featherweight. You have to get a featherweight. Hans, excuse me, you're not a real sewing machine collector if you don't have a featherweight in your collection. They beat him up left and right about it. So finally he caved in and picked up, excuse me, as you know, a featherweight, and then also recently a Featherweight 222 as well. So there's like a club mentality when it comes to featherweight owners. And they'll talk about how scarce they are. Oh, my machine is very rare. Oh, really? What year is it from? 1951. And they'll go on and on about their featherweights and how they found it and how they groom it and that they bathe it every week, etc., etc., etc. Well, here's the reality, folks. The machine you're looking at on screen right now that belongs to Maddy out of Florida is actually more scarce and more rare than the Featherweight 221. The one that I just showed you on the screen a second ago. This one, right over here. Even this one. This is the 222. There's the 222 again. It's more scarce than the 222. It's more scarce. Well, I don't know if it's more scarce than that one or not, but it might be. And we're not even looking at neckies right now. So anyway, I'm back over here now. But the point is this. During the lifetime production of the featherweight, they made about 3.5 million of them. 3.5 million. That's a lot of machines, folks. That's a lot of machines for any manufacturing class. It truthfully is. During the lifetime production of the Singer 301 that you're looking at on screen right now, they only made 185,750. 185,750 compared to 3.5 million featherweight 221s. I rest my case. So the next time you're in a group, you're in a blog, you're on a whatever kind of a site that is featherweight specific, and you get somebody that jumps into the game and they start talking about how rare and how scarce their featherweight 221 is, you point them to this premiere video, would you? So that they can hear those numbers and all of a sudden be grounded back to reality that, you know what, featherweight's a wonderful machine. Yeah, it's 11 pounds. Wonderful. Yay, awesome. There were 3.5 million of them. And then you can look at a machine like this that only weighs about 5 pounds more than the featherweight 221. 16 pounds is how much this incredible 301 weighs. So less than a half a gallon of milk is the difference in weight between the 301 and the featherweight 221. And yet, they only made 185,750 of these. And they only made them for one production year. Okay? Even the 222, they made that one for, I think it was 8 years, right, Hans? I think we already researched that. It's around 8 years is how long they made the featherweight 222, the free arm version of the featherweight. So again, exclusivity, scarcity, rareness, blah, 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 blah. Featherweight owners, stop. Stop talking about it because it isn't true. If you want to start talking about rarity and scarcity and exclusivity, start talking about Maddy's 301 or talk about a 301A because the 301A has bragging rights as well. Yes, it was made from 1953 to 1957, but there were only 514,250 301As made. That's still only a fraction, about 1/6 of the number of featherweight 221s that were made. So whether you own a 301 like Maddy out of Florida, or whether you own a 301A, stand tall. Let people know. Go to a mountaintop and shout, "My machine is more scarce and more exclusive and more rare than a featherweight 221. Yeah, I think you should. Go to the nearest mountain right now. Leave the premiere. Leave this premiere. You can come back and watch it later. Go to the nearest mountain and shout that out. And if you do, videotape yourself doing it, and I'll send you something really special for doing that. Okay? Oh gosh, it bugs me when people do that. You know, they're propagating basically a lie about how exclusive, how rare, how scarce their machine is, and you've got the 301, 301A owners quietly going along as the big sister of the featherweight, not even feeling like they have to do that boasting or bragging, but they should. We should. Okay. And real quick before we jump into things with Maddy's machine, let me remind you again that the 301 was the very first slant-o-matic machine that Singer ever made. The very first. The 301A followed it only a year later in 1953. And then there were other slant-o-matics that followed as well. And I like sharing this information because many of you own these machines and you may not know this information. And if you're an owner of a machine, you're empowered to know these things. You should be. So the 401A that so many of you love, and I have a number of those videos on my channel of 401As. That machine started in 1956 and it went until 1961. So it came on the scene about a year before the 301A went away, was out of production. The 403A followed the 401A, and it started in 1958 and went until 1960. Now we have the 404, which is a straight stitch only machine, and the 404 started in 1958 and went until 1963. And then our last two slant-o-matics that I'm going to point at is the 500A, and if you remember Frank Wilson that I interviewed, the gentleman that worked for Singer, he had his own Singer store, etc., etc. Remember, that was his favorite machine. I asked him in the interview, and it's on the YouTube channel if you want to look it up. Just type in the search Frank Wilson interview and you'll find it. But when I asked Frank, out of all the years of experience he had working with Singer, having his own Singer shop, and then later having his own sewing shop, what was his favorite machine of all time? And he said the 500A, which was the beginning of the Rocketeer phase, basically. And that started in 1961 and went until 1963. The same year bracket, we had the 503A, also a Rocketeer, coming on the scene as well. And out of those two Rocketeers, I'll be honest with you, my favorite is the 503A. And I also have that featured on my channel as well. So there you go. I'm done beating up the featherweight people and putting them back in their place and saying, stop it. And I'm done encouraging the 301, 301A owners to go to the nearest mountaintop and to shout. Well, you already know what I told them to shout. And yes, I'll send you something really nice if you videotape yourself doing that. If you're out in Washington State, go to Mount Rainier or go to some other mountain nearby where you are. Or build a large dirt mound and stand on the top of the dirt mound. And I'll send you something less special, because to do that, you really are pretty special. You know what I mean? Like special. Okay. All right. So here's Maddy's machine. And if you were paying attention to all the dates I just threw out, which was a lot of them, you already know that Maddy's machine, being a 301, was born in 1952, right? Where was it born? Was it born in A, Anderson, South Carolina, or B, Elizabethport, New Jersey? Again, was Maddy's 301 from 1952, was it born in Anderson, South Carolina, or Elizabethport, New Jersey? Hold on a second, because at the end of that, yeah, they ring a bell. I think they do. There's some sort of a bell or a buzzer or something. Okay, if you typed in the chat, and if you haven't typed in the chat by now, then you're really a slow typer and you need to go back to remedial typing class. Or you're not going to pass it and you're going to have summer school, okay? Yeah, there. So if you said that Maddy's 301 was born in the great state of New Jersey, Elizabethport, New Jersey, then give yourself a pat on the back, because you've been paying attention on this channel. And you don't just pat yourself on the back, make yourself a little board in your kitchen and put a gold star on it. Every time you attend one of the premieres and I pose a question and you answer it correctly, put a gold star on there. And when you fill up the entire board, take a picture of it, send it to me, and I will post it on Facebook, and then I'll send you something special, okay? All kinds of contest opportunities in this premiere. I'm not even going to remember all of them, so you're going to have to remind me. Okay. And let me give you a couple more dates, okay? You got a lot of dates, so if you don't have a pencil, a pen, or a crayon or something to write with, you probably should always bring that to class, because this is a classroom, right? So as you look at your serial number on your 301A, because again, you don't need to know these brackets for the 301 because it was only made 1 year, 1952. But because the 301A was made from 1953 to 1957, these bracket dates might be helpful to you. And again, underneath that little fold-down bed, against what I would call the firewall of the machine, you'll see your serial number there. And if it starts with an NA, Nancy Apple, your machine was born in 1951. If it starts with NB, Nancy Bravo, your machine was born in 1956. If your machine serial number, again, your 301A serial number, starts with NC, Nancy Charlie, then your machine was born in 1961. Okay? Apart from that, the 301s, if you have other dates in that period, Say, for example, if you have 19... No, I covered it. Didn't I cover it? 53... Well, actually I didn't. 53, 54, and 55, and 57. Yeah. But at any rate, those are the dates that I have at my fingertips. So hopefully at least what I gave you is helpful. Okay? So Maddy's machine, as you may or may not remember, came to the workshop when I did the unboxing. And again, you can look up Maddy's machine on the channel under unboxing videos. And it was done a while back. But if you want to look it up, you'll see that when it arrived at the workshop, Maddy had already given it quite a beautiful shine. And of course, during the time that Ebony has been in the workshop, and this is Ebony, by the way, I'm kind of rude in not introducing her sooner. This is Maddy's Ebony, and Maddy loves this machine. Let me just draw the analogy again that, God forbid, but if Maddy's house caught fire and there was that obnoxious nephew or niece in the house, Maddy would carry out Ebony and get her to safety, and then, oh, should I? Yeah, I guess I gotta. Then she would go back in and get the niece or nephew. So Ebony is really, really special to Maddy. And she made that known to me when she shipped this machine. Like, hey, you better keep it safe or Vinny and Guido are going to come for you, Scott. Just so you know, buddy. Just so you know. So we'll kind of take a look at some of the beginning pictures. No, we won't, because it just went into screensaver. We'll look at some of the beginning pictures of Ebony. And I'll have to keep this moving because for that opening where I wanted you to see some of the classic featherweight advertisements, I moved the screensaver down to coming on in 1 minute. There we go. So I'm going to have to move quick, or maybe I could change it real quick. Let me see if I can change it real quick so that I don't have to battle this thing the whole premiere. Give me just a second here. It won't take long. Okay, screensaver, go up to, why don't we say 5 minutes? There we go. That should make it a little bit easier. Okay, so this is Maddy's machine shortly after it arrived. I believe I did wipe it down a little bit, but not much. It was a real looker even when Ebony arrived. And I'll tell you that is not the case with all customer machines. Some of the customers' machines arrive and they are downright scary looking. You would expect something to crawl out of them when you start to go through the machine thoroughly. Not Maddy's machine. Ebony, quite a looker. So here I'm starting to take Ebony apart. And no machines were harmed in the filming of this premiere, so she's fine. But I'm starting to go through Ebony because, again, I've said this before, you can be shopping for a machine, make and model, whatever it is. And all of us have that initial reaction. If we see a machine that's really shiny, really pretty looking, we will start to sometimes draw the conclusion that the inside of the machine is as good as the outside. Well, as you'll see, even with Ebony, and even as persnickety as Maddy may be about Ebony, Ebony still was a very dirty girl on the inside, as you'll see. And along with that, as you may or may not remember, she had some major motor issues. And we'll get into some of those pictures so you can see some of the work that I did to Ebony's motor. But just a lot of filth, a lot of varnishing, a lot of gook, a lot of grime inside of this beautiful, shiny, pretty 301. So I'll say it again, buyer beware. There are people out there that I'll just call them charlatans, sewing charlatans. They've discovered that vintage machines can potentially be profitable, so they'll pick up a machine anywhere they can find it. might be on the curb, might be, wherever. And they'll shine it up a little bit, and then they'll put it out there as a fully restored machine. And you'll find stuff like this. You see all that gook and grime and dirt at the base of that worm gear. A critical part of the machine that powers the entire main shaft. And it was just totally gooked up and grimed up. And there you can see as well on the walls of that chamber where that worm gear is, it is just a very, very dirty, filthy, yucky machine. And if I were to show you just a picture of these showing all the dirt and filth, and then show you the opening picture of how beautiful Ebony is on the outside, you may almost be in disbelief that it's the same machine, but it certainly is. And if you don't know it, there are a lot of worm gear clusters on the 301. The same thing is true of the featherweight as well. And all of them have to be cleaned, conditioned. All of that stuff there has to be stripped off in between each and every one of those grooves. And then it has to ultimately be greased again. Because those interlacing metal gears, if there's not some sort of a buffer between them, like a good quality grease, the stuff that I have exclusively in the workshop, then those gears are going to eventually start to degrade. Because we're talking about metal to metal grinding at very, very high revolutions. And inevitably you're going to have a major breakdown with that machine if it's not lubed properly. And here again you can just see all the dirt and all the filth inside of Ebony. There's a real clear shot of it again. And all of these shots that show this dirt and grime and varnishing and everything else, that's all going to be holding Ebony back from reaching her full potential. It's going to hold her back because that dirt and grime is inside of all the pivot points. It's in this main shaft area. It's down this well, this lubricating well right here for that main shaft. And it holds her back so that she can't realize her full potential. And that motor that eventually failed on Maddy, that was the main reason, or on Maddy, oh my gosh. Sorry, Maddy. That motor, Maddy's motor did not fail. That motor that failed on Ebony, which is what prompted Maddy to send me Ebony, was in part because the machine on the inside was so gunked up and so filthy that 0.54 amp motor was having to work overload to try to turn that main shaft and deliver some sort of sewing quality to the machine and to to whatever the material was underneath the presser foot. Grab me a quick drink of lemonade. Sorry about that. So again, I just want to say for the record, there's nothing wrong with Maddy's motor. It's fine. Ebony's motor, on the other hand, had some major issues going on. And the environment of the machine on the inside being so dirty contributed to the downfall of that motor significantly. Here you can see even more of that buildup as well. And again, dirt, varnishing, filth, grime, all the other things that you could come up with to describe what this stuff is. It does not stay in one location. It migrates around the machine and it gets sucked into what? The tripod that I just kicked. It gets sucked into the motor. Remember I talked about the motor being like a vacuum cleaner. Anything in that environment, dirt, dust, smoke, pet dander, whatever it is, it's going to eventually find its way into that motor and all the other parts of the machine as well. You're going to see more of that dirt and filth on there. Even inside of the faceplate area, which is not as common, it just shows you how prevalent the dirt and the grime and the varnishing and the grease and every, old grease really was on Ebony. And there's Dr. Singer. He's kind of surprised because he saw Ebony from a distance and was like, wow, beautiful, beautiful 301. And as he got closer and saw as I was taking the machine apart, a little bit of surprise on his face there. And now we're at the base of the machine on the right side, starting to look at that motor. The motor made a real high-pitched, whining, grinding sound. It was just horrible. As a matter of fact, I happened to be on a call with Hans in Norway. We were talking about the next contest coming up because we're getting really close to our next major giveaway contest when we hit 9,000 subscribers. And I was on the phone with Hans, and I said, Hans, listen to this. Tell me what you think. And I put my foot on the foot controller, and then I even went to a video chat on Facebook where he could see the machine and listen to it at the same time. And he goes, wow, something is definitely wrong. And that was just when I was beginning to get into the machine, so I hadn't done a lot of diagnosing yet, but I had a fairly good idea what it was. And there you can see those worm gears are just nasty. And there's no buffer at all between those worm gears as they're spinning and interlacing together, so it's grinding metal to metal. It would be like driving your car with no oil. And what would happen to all those lifters and everything else inside of the motor with no lubricant as a cushion to protect them. And here again you can just see more of that filth throughout Ebony's machine environment. Just more of it up here, down here. And here I've taken some of the housing off of the motor that hold it in place, and I'm starting to get more into the motor. Here's our pitman arms reaching up to the top of the machine, and they're also covered in varnishing as well. So it's throughout the entire machine. And there you can see, after I applied some solvent to cleaning them, how much brighter and cleaner they look. Remember, the pitman arms are going to be moving up and down with the operation of the machine, so any part that moves or pivots has to be clean and lubricated. And here I've taken off some covers on the motor itself. Again, if you're not familiar with the 301, 301A, it has a vertically mounted kind of a stack style motor. And again, the motor size is going to be comparable. A lot of people don't realize this, but the motor size in the 301, 301A is comparable in size to a 201-2 or a 1591, which also have 0.54 amp, basically just rounded up to 0.6 amp when they peak, 0.6 amp motors. So the 201-2, the Rolls-Royce of Singer sewing machines, and its little brother, the 1591, are going to have comparable power outputs to this Slantomatic model. And the only difference is, it's driving that power vertically to a worm gear that's interlaced with a balance wheel. And what I'm looking at now is this electrical field. Here's coming down the carbon brush assembly that you've got a carbon brush on either side of the motor that completes the circuit and that runs over this electrical field. If your motor is clean and running well and it's not running in a rough manner, then you're going to have very, very minimal sparks when you push on that foot controller to activate the motor. If the motor is not running well, if it's unhealthy, kind of like if you see a car driving down the road and when it pulls away from the light or the stop sign, all of a sudden you see a bunch of smoke come out of the exhaust. That's a telltale sign that something is wrong with that motor in that car and it's not running efficiently, it's not running effectively. The same thing is true of an electrical motor. The more output you get as far as sparks or smoke or anything like that, the less efficient and the more problematic that motor is. So here's an opening shot where I have not pushed on the foot control. And now I've shut the lights off in the workshop so I can actually evaluate how much sparking are we getting. So here I'm beginning to push down the foot control. It's not all the way down yet. Now I'm starting to give more power to the motor, and you can see the sparking is increasing exponentially. Let's see how close we are. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to see in this light. Let me change the angle of that screen a little bit, maybe that'll help. Did that help or did that make it worse? Yeah, it may just be a little bit harder to see on screen, but you can also look at these on Facebook. I have them posted on Facebook too. So here I'm even applying more power. Look at how significantly that sparking is going up from those carbon brushes hitting that electrical field. So we have the equivalent of a car with a lot of exhaust coming out of the tailpipes. And now, after I warm that motor up a little bit, I'm also going to be checking a little bit further in full lighting. All the lights are on in the workshop, and we'll see how prevalent the sparking is now that the motor is running hotter. Because as a motor runs hotter, if it's not operating efficiently, it's going to have more and more problems, just like a car. And you can see here the field of sparks as I'm hitting that foot controller with almost full power. We're getting a significant amount of sparking, which is telling us that motor is troubled. That motor is definitely having trouble. So I've taken the motor out, and Dr. Singer is giving me some advice on what he would suggest the next steps can be. There I've turned the motor a little bit, and I'm getting ready to hand it to him and say, okay, you play with it then, buddy. Buddy. Dr. Singer is a good guy, but he sometimes forgets that I'm his boss. He kind of, yeah, at any rate. These are duplicates. So I'll go through these shots a little bit quicker, but here I've gone through, I'm going through the process of taking that motor apart and beginning to do a deep cleaning on the motor, and also replacing some bearings on it as well, which are partially seized, and that's causing that motor to drag and to have to work a whole lot harder than it needs to. Also in the process, I'm doing more dirt and grime removal from the environment of the machine. Now this area where I'm touching with the dental tool right there is where you'll find your serial number on your 301, 301A. This would be the fold down bed right here. We're looking at the bottom of the machine. So it's going to be right on the bottom of the machine, kind of next to that firewall, as I said, on the machine. And right now you can't even really, I mean, you can barely make out a couple of numbers, but it's really tough because all that grime and stuff that was so prevalent throughout the machine is on here as well. Does that look different? A little bit? Night and day, isn't it? Getting rid of that tripod, so I just keep on kicking it. Now, getting rid of all that dirt and grime is so essential to being able to optimize the machine. I can't overemphasize it. And here we're just continuing to move through the machine. There's some Q-tip swabs that have already been picking up more of that stuff. Here's some of those worm gears that I was pointing out where we basically had metal grinding against metal, and now we're adding some of my special grease to make sure that that stops now so that there isn't any additional damage to those worm gears on Ebony. And you can't just put a glob on there of the special grease. You've got to work it into each one of the grooves of those worm gears so that as those worm gears turn, there's grease on all of the surface areas where there's going to be metal to metal contact. Lots of lubrication points on the 301, and that's part of what I'm doing right here. And this is the oil pan that's on the bottom of the machine, which was really filthy, so I'm just cleaning it up a little bit so that as Maddy uses the machine and oils the machine about every 10 hours of sewing, I would say 2 to 3 drops. Just follow what the book recommends as far as the oiling points, but about every 10 hours. That pan on the bottom will be able to absorb oil that might drip down to keep it from going into the machine and creating more of that filth and buildup that was there before. And there you can see a real clear shot of the serial number on Ebony. You can actually see it now that all that stuff was cleaned off. And again, it's basically on the bottom of the machine, just right next to the firewall, kind of adjacent to that little opening you can see there, goes right up into the raceway area. And this is that well that you saw earlier that had a lot of buildup. I'm just trying to get that cleaned up. I'm trying to get this vertically mounted worm gear cleaned up as well. And that worm gear, if you follow it straight down, it connects directly to the motor. So it's basically like if you can almost imagine a handheld drill that you would be pointing skyward with some sort of a long drill bit on it. And then you squeeze that trigger and it spins up. That's kind of how the motor works on the 301, 301A. Well, it also works the same way on the 401A and the 403A and the 404 and the 500A and the 503A, blah, 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 blah. They're all going to have that vertically mounted 0.54 amp motor, with the exception of the 401A that has a larger motor. If you didn't know that, the 401A is going to come typically, and I'll say typically because Singer factories didn't always follow the same rules, but it's typically going to come with let's just say a 1 amp motor. I think it's actually technically rated at 0.9 amps, but it peaks at about 1 amp. The 401A again. More cleaning, and more cleaning, and more cleaning. And now I'm greasing that main shaft worm gear that comes vertically off of the motor, because it's going to be interlacing with the balance wheel. Basically, it's a special grooving on the balance wheel that this will interlace with to drive the machine. And again, creating a cushion or a buffer between this worm gear and the other one. The other one is going to be, it's not going to be metal, it's actually going to be a Teflon type material that Singer developed that is very, very strong and very, very long lasting. More worm gears. They're everywhere. And again, I'm just putting my special grease on there. Again, do not put grease on dirty worm gears. Don't do it. You got to clean the worm gears first and then you put the grease on. Don't leave the dirt there. So here you can see a pretty good shot. Let me see if you can see the same thing I can in the camera. Yep. So this is that Teflon type material that Singer developed right here that encircles the balance wheel. And then this is the worm gear that comes up off of the motor, and that's how they join together. So you can see it's basically metal to Teflon, and it's essential that there's some sort of a cushion, some sort of a buffer in there. And my special grease is the perfect solution. Here's the inside of the clutch retainer on that mounts to the right side of the machine. Just again cleaning that all up. And here is, again, these are not in sequence. Now you're going to see me tearing the motor apart before it's reinstalled. And here you can see motor parts all over the workbench. I think you can see that. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah. So taking apart a motor, you got to be very, very careful. Lots of small parts, and they all have to go back together as they were intended to go back together. Or guess what? That motor and that machine is going to run so quiet. It's going to be it's going to be like a stealth sewing machine, because it's not going to work. More shots of it. So you remember that worm gear where you were just, the one that I told you juts off at the top of the motor? That's it right there. And here you're looking at more motor components, all of which were as filthy as the rest of the machine. And again, remember we have electricity running through these fields. Electricity is running through all of these fields, including these contacts up here as well, where the motor connects to the machine. So grease and grime and dirt and varnishing and everything is not the friend of anything, especially an electrical motor. So this is the equivalent of a motor bath. I'm using a special solvent that's going to break down that varnishing and grease and grime and everything off of those copper contacts and get the machine motor back to a point where it needs to be. And this is like a bulb like you would use on a little baby. I think I got it from the pharmacy at Walmart or something similar to that. And any of you that are parents know that that little bulb is typically used with a little baby when their nose is congested. It kind of goes up the nose. You squeeze the bulb before it goes up the baby's nose, and then you release it. And like a little vacuum cleaner, it sucks all the yucky stuff out of the baby's nose if the baby is having trouble, breathing, has congestion or whatever. But it also works beautifully as a means of giving a motor a bath with special solvent. And I don't know if you can see it, but it holds a lot of fluid too. I'm discharging a lot of that solvent onto that motor to wash off all those parts. And here on the bottom of the screen, or actually the top of the screen, you can see, because all the liquid in the bottom of that tin is that solvent material, kind of like water and grease, they don't mix. So it's solidifying in the solvent, looking like basically like an oil spill or something like that. And this is part of the housing of the motor. And I was feeling a little bit goofy at that point, which happens frequently, as you probably know. So if you look real close, I'm pointing this long cone-like motor shaft at Mr. Bean, who came over to check out what I was doing. Again, Mr. Bean tries to get involved in everything because he wants to prove himself and become an assistant like Dr. Singer. So I did it like a little viewing telescope with Mr. Bean at the end of it. And these are all on Facebook too if you want to see them a little bit closer. And Mr. Bean is looking slightly offended, like, really? Really? So here's a special tool that I had to use to take certain snap rings off of the motor to disassemble it. And this is what the entire, let me turn my screen around. This is what the entire package looks like, basically. You get different snap ring connectors depending on if you're applying a snap ring or putting one on. This particular set was by Tecton, and very helpful. I mean, trying to get a snap ring off otherwise is near to impossible. And you can definitely get blood blisters and cut your hand and everything else if you're not real careful with snap rings. They have a huge amount of tension when they're in place, which they're designed to do. And there's that shaft that I was just pointing towards Mr. Bean and kind of looking at him, and now I'm beginning to reassemble Maddy's motor. Again, for the record, there's nothing wrong with Maddy's motor. It was Ebony's motor that had problems. I'm going to be getting nasty notes from people and from Maddy's family saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with Maddy's motor, it's fine. Oh, gosh, what a hoot. What a hoot, right? Is that the first one we played? Road Trip, right? Yeah, it is. Okay, so at last, you've been very attentive in our classroom. And no, it's not time for recess yet, and no, you can't have a snack, and do not lay on your blanket. Okay, we're still in class, doggone it. So, So back over to Maddy's 301. Again, from what year? If you typed in the chat 1952, you're absolutely right. Yeah, some guzzling lemonade off screen. Oh, this lemonade is so good. I don't know that they know how to make lemonade up here in the north. When I was down in Georgia and Mississippi area and some of those other southern areas, boy, they had lemonade that was like a sacred drink down there. It was so good. And the longer, and like the sweet teas, the longer they left it out, the better it got. It was like no refrigeration needed. Then just dump a bunch of ice into it. It was, at any rate, I digress. So here's Maddy's machine. Let me head us over. Actually, we'll walk around the machine a little bit first. Let's do that. So down here on the bottom, you can see obviously we have our tensioner for winding a bobbin. If you're going to wind a bobbin, let me kind of use my little, let's see. I'm going to move this cord off to the side here a little bit, I think. There we go. So, if you're going to wind a bobbin, it's very simple on the 301. I'm going to kind of expand my shot a little bit so we kind of look at it closer. You're going to obviously put your spool of thread here on this point, and then you're going to come underneath. What I would recommend you do, you can do it one of two ways, but the better way to do it, the book tells you to do it one way, and then I would recommend you consider doing it another way. But when you come off the spool, you want to go over the top of the tensioner and around the bottom and then up, because it's less likely than if you're winding at a higher rate of speed that thread is going to come off of the tensioner. So go kind of over the top, under, and then come up here. And then you're going to put your bobbin on, obviously, give it a couple of winds, and then you rotate it up into the balance wheel to wind it. And then as it gets to a certain point, depending on how you have this little thing here set, it's going to push that bobbin away, and you can't even see what I'm pointing at. My shot wasn't wide enough. So what I was beginning to say is, you bring your thread up here to this winder, wrap it around a couple times on your bobbin, and remember that this also has a lubrication point on it as well, so that this turns more freely and creates less drag on that balance wheel when you're winding a bobbin. So make sure that you periodically are lubricating this as well. Just a single drop of oil, and then turn it like this to spread that oil evenly through that chamber where that little bobbin winder is turning. And then you just rotate it up to the balance wheel, and there is a little stopper here that will determine how much you're able to wind that bobbin before it pushes it away and kind of disengages it from the balance wheel for winding. And then obviously disengage your clutch before you wind a bobbin. Otherwise, if you're threaded up, it's going to create a big mess down at the needle. So here we've got our beautiful badge mark for Singer, showing it as a 301. If you're new to this channel, if it were a 301A, then it would say, it would have an A after the 1. And if it were a 301A, just type in the chat, where would that machine have been made? We know that the 301 was made where? Elizabethport, New Jersey, right? That's where Maddy's machine was made, Elizabethport, New Jersey. But if it had an A after the 1, then it would have been made in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It would have been made in Anderson, South Carolina, which again is real close to where Frank Wilson lives and where he had his Singer store. So as we move over here, you can see that we've got our stitch length controller. Right now I have it set pretty close to right around in the 20 to 25 per stitch range. And if I go above that little demarcation line, then I'm going to be beginning to sew in reverse. What else? What else can we see around here? Do you guys want me to walk over threading real quick? You think we should do that? Most people get the threading on 301, 301As correctly, but we can certainly do that. Here, I'll come off the tripod real quick. I've got to disconnect myself because I'm connected to power. It's wonderful to have power. So you got to kind of get an idea of, yeah. Again, the machine looked really good when it arrived, and I didn't spend a huge amount of time because I've got so much. You can even see my little cow. Holy cow, it's your birthday! So if it is your birthday in August, happy birthday again. But, yeah, it's great to have power when you're trying to shoot a longer premiere. So, here's our spool of thread. Come across here. We have our first thread guide right there. We then come through this groove across the top of the machine. We have another, I'm going to sit down because otherwise I'm going to fall over. So we have another thread guide right here at the front. And you can see the thread just goes through the goalpost from one to the other. We then come down here and you can see the thread, where am I? The thread is behind this thread guide, this rather large thread guide. And then it goes through the tension discs and around the bottom. Now, whenever you're threading up a machine, make sure of two things. Make sure that the take-up arm is at the highest position. Make sure that your presser foot lever is up. Because otherwise, when you thread the machine and you go to put that thread, you're going to think it's between those tension discs, but it's not really going to be between the tension discs because the tension discs are basically pinched together if that presser foot is down, because that's how you create tension, obviously. And then you're going to have all kinds of problems with bird nesting on your sewing project, whatever it is. So presser foot up, take-up arm at the highest position, and then when you pull that thread between the discs, hold the thread somewhere above. It can, hold it over here or whatever, and then just kind of draw that thread up and make sure it gets seated in those tension discs real well. And then you're going to come over here, and this is our little take-up spring. The thread is going to kind of come underneath that take-up spring, and you're going to draw that take-up spring this direction, and then it's going to go over this point where that little, almost looks like a hook. It kind of goes over that hook, and that's how we're regulating tension between the discs and the take-up spring. And again, the function of the take-up spring right here, this little guy that goes up and down while you're sewing, is if that take-up spring wasn't there or if it was defective, you would constantly have your thread breaking, because what it does is every time it cycles up and down for just a microsecond, it's taking the tension off of those discs and allowing that thread to advance so that you can sew. If that spring is bent, if it's in some other way gunked up or defective in some way, or you somehow missed it in the threading process, whatever, then your thread is going to be breaking and you're going to be very frustrated. So just be mindful of that. And then after you get it through the spring, you're going to come behind the same thread guide right here, and then you'll come through the take-up arm, down through this thread guide. There's another curlicue thread guide right there. Where am I? Right there. And again, you get through that curlicue by coming from left to right underneath, and then in front of that little groove thingy, the little thing sticking out. And then there's another thread guide right there, and then another thread guide right here that a lot of people miss, right there. I'm touching it with my fingernail. Come from the back, and then that gets the thread centered on the needle. And then you're going to be threading this machine from, let me sit back here and zoom in, maybe it'll be better. You're going to be threading this machine from right to left. And again, on the beauty of the 301 301A is that it has a foolproof needle shaft. There's only one way you can insert a needle on a 301 301A, and that is with the flat side to the left, pointing away from the motor. Just think of it that way. If you try to insert the flat side to the back, not going to work. If you try to slide it in with the flat side to the front, not going to work. you try to slide it in with the flat side to the right, not going to work. Only to the left, okay? And then you'll just bring your thread, obviously, underneath your presser foot, and then rotate your balance wheel towards you as you normally would to draw that thread up from the bobbin. Now, a quick tip about the bobbin. And I don't know how I'm going to do this. Maybe I'll just kind of fake it. So, you're going to hold your bobbin. Let me come out. You're going to hold your bobbin in your left hand, like this. And you want to have the little groove that you can kind of see right there by my thumb. We're going to be drawing that thread through there to get it underneath this tension band, and then eventually out the very top there between the little goalposts. See where that is? And when you put your bobbin in, make sure that the thread is coming over the top. Like this. So as that bobbin is turning, it's going to be turning counterclockwise. Okay? So thread over the top. Imagine that the bobbin is in my left hand, and then you put it in and then draw it through the grooves. And you'll have a very happy bobbin case area. You might have a very happy bobbin case area. And I'll do a quick little shameless plug. Why shouldn't I? So a couple of you have asked, do I sell machines on eBay? I don't. I used to. But I do sell some little things, little trinkets, like Husqvarna belts, the long belt, the short belt, motor brushes for the Husqvarna, and also some owner's manual. And one of the owner's manual that I sell is for the Singer Machine 301. This is actually a reproduction, but I had it professionally done, all in color, professionally bound, and I offer it on my eBay account, which is King of Kettle Corn. And if you want to contact me to get the story behind King of Kettle Corn, I can tell you that. But it's a fabulous little book. I think there's about 70 pages. And I sell it for really the cost of what it cost me to print it in color, which is $15. And I think right now I'm offering free shipping. So I think I only have one of those left. But eventually I could get more printed, so. All right, other than that fruit fly landing on the machine, which I am very tempted to swat at, but I won't do it because Ebony does not appreciate when I swat fruit flies on her beautiful shiny bed. And that is a beautiful shiny bed, isn't it? Yeah. It's not perfect, but she is gorgeous, isn't she? I'm not even going to do it off the tripod because we've already done it. Duh. Okay. Well, let's get back on the tripod, get some more music on because it is way too quiet in here. Way too quiet. And we will continue marching forward with this premiere. And this first sew off I'm going to do is actually going to be a leather suede. And you'll see that again that I have my stitch length set really short. We're going to do about 25 stitches per inch on Ebony. And see how she handles leather suede. And again, I don't use leather needles. See how she handles leather suede with a teeny tiny stitch, which is, if any of you know this or not and you sew leather, when you're trying to do a teeny tiny stitch and you're piercing that leather with that intensity, that closeness, getting stitches that tight, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. A lot of things that can go wrong. Okay, so the first song I played is called Road Trip. The next one is called Staycation. So let's hear what this sounds like, and I'll obviously have to turn the volume down so y'all can hear how beautifully Ebony is running now with no grinding sound from the motor and no whining sound or anything like that. It's kind of just a cool jazz song. This is not, they got it listed as funky, but we're not funky yet. All right, another quick drink of water, and then we'll do this leather suede material. This actually used to be part of a jacket, and the jacket became kind of unserviceable, and I decided that I would commit it to the cause. So I'm starting to cut this jacket up. Wore the jacket for quite a while, actually. All right, so let's get this leather suede. Oh, you know what? I was going to show you one other thing real quick. I think it's interesting. And yes, I have to change my camera shot. Because some of you that have 301s, 301As, you probably have at one point or another thought about, especially as I've been talking about it more and more and more and more. Did you see that fruit fly just fly by? About as big as a small plane. My son, youngest son, tries to build like little mounds of soda cans up in his room and doesn't remember to rinse them out all the time. And then the fruit flies come into play, and oh boy, it's a battle. It's a battle! Get off of Maddy's machine, you nasty fruit fly. If you hear a loud sound, it's me swinging at this thing. It may happen. So what I want to show you real quick is if you've ever kind of put your hand underneath your 301, 301A. Hold on a second. I might be able to get him here. I missed him. Doggone it. Okay. Well, if you ever put your hand underneath there, you can feel that there's a glass covering. And you might have thought, oh, that's a lot of work to try to get that cover off to put one of those new LED lights in. Well, this is the bulb that was in Ebony when she came to the workshop, and you can see, I think you can see, that light has had better days. It's definitely had better days, and it wasn't putting out decent light. So I've already replaced it, but I'll show you how easy it is to take this off. There's basically two bolts that hold this housing on. Now, a big caution, a big caution. We take this first bolt out, there it is. But as you start to take this second bolt out, you want to have a hand underneath that housing, because otherwise, as that bolt comes out, this housing with that glass cover is going to drop to the bed, and you might have glass everywhere. So keep a hand kind of underneath that bed, or underneath that the bottom of the housing. And that way, as you're getting that bolt out, when you get it out to a certain point, you can then take it out by hand. And make sure that it doesn't drop. So this is what the front of that light assembly looks like. And then if you rotate it, you can see that glass right there, which is held on by just a little clamp. There's a little clamp right here that holds that glass on. So it wouldn't hurt when you have it off. If you have a small screwdriver, I'm reaching for a small screwdriver. If you have a small screwdriver, just to check that clamp, so that if it's loose a little bit, you can tighten it up so that that glass doesn't potentially come off and crash. And you can see here I've already put in the LED bulb replacement. You just push in and then rotate to the back of the machine to remove the bulb. And then to insert the bulb, just line it up with those openings, push it in, rotate it towards you, and then it locks in place beautifully. And then you can just, and the other tip as well is that when you have this, I just got that fruit fly, yay, it's probably like 10,000 more of them, but when you have this off, it wouldn't hurt to, on a little soft cloth, to put a little bit of glass cleaner and clean this off both sides as well, so that there's not grease and other things built up on here that are going to hold back that bright light from coming through. And I'm just going to quickly, I've already cleaned it, but I'll wipe it off again just with a tissue. And again, you don't have to wipe it hard, just kind of wipe it over a little bit and get any of that residual oil or whatever it is off of there. And then you just slide it back into place. It just kind of fits into the housing. Keep a hand on it, get your first bolt in. Actually, I can turn that a little bit before I use the screwdriver. And just, you know, be careful as you're turning the screwdriver, because it's easy for this screwdriver to skip off, and there you have a painted surface right there next to it, and it's easy for that to happen if you're not careful. So when you get in, just kind of push in a little bit, give it a nice turn, and then now that it's secure, you can let go of it and get that other bolt in place and get it back together. So if you happen to win one of my contests and you say, I'd like to get one of those LED bulbs, and you have a 301 or 301A, now you've seen how easy it is to change that light out. So don't take it to a sewing center and let them charge you 20 bucks or something like that to do what we just did in a matter of, I mean, if I had done less talking and more turning, that we just did in a matter of, you know, a couple seconds, basically. Yeah, I just got rid of that one fruit fly, and now his brother Vinny is out here to seek revenge. He's out here to seek revenge. Well, good luck, buddy. There you go. There's a bell for you. All right. So I'm going to turn the sewing light on now, and the sewing light is right underneath there. There's that doggone fruit fly. Vengeance. Ha-ha! 2 down. Kind of jammed him underneath my plexiglass there. That was gross. Yeah, like I said, 2 down, there's probably 10,000 more, so. All right. So let's get this leather suede underneath the needle. This stuff is kind of tricky. It's got a real dense weave to it when it comes to the nap of the leather in that, because it's a processed leather. Again, especially when you're looking at sewing tight stitches like this, it can be a little bit of a booger. So hopefully it's not a booger today. All right, so staycation, and now we have a little bit of Jazz Mango. Jazz Mango. All right, and I'm going to turn this music down even a little bit lower because I really want you to listen to Ebony now. Now that she's been renewed. All right, here we go. That is a booger of stuff, I'll tell you that right now. Good gravy, Eloady. Alright, I'm just going to show this real quick. I'm not real happy with this stitch, but, oops, we're way out there. Where am I? So there's our top stitch. I turn it over. There's our lock stitch, and we actually have a little bit of a thread bind right there. So not bad, but leather suede is just one of those materials that can really give you a hard time. So let's move on to another leather type now, which is our genuine elk hide. And we'll give Maddy's machine a chance to shine. So I'm going to move our stitch length back to a normal setting instead of 25 stitches per inch. And we'll see how Ebony does on this stitch off. And I also need to get closer, don't I? And if you're new to this channel, look at how thick that genuine elk hide is. It is the thick of thick. It's like sewing a belt, basically. So we'll see how Maddy's machine does with this task, going down this material. And again, I'm going to try to control the speed because this machine has a lot of speed now. All right, are you ready? Okay, here we go. and went up and down, 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 up and down. Beautiful stitch. And it's funny, you know, certain machines, they like sewing things more than others. Obviously, Ebony is not a huge fan of sewing a teeny tiny stitch on leather suede, but she absolutely loves this genuine elk hide, which again, it's like sewing a leather belt. It's a lot more difficult task, and most people would not think of a Slant-O-Matic as a heavy-duty sewing machine, but when they're set up properly, boy, can they go through the heavy grade stuff. Big time. Big time. Oops, I better plug my camera back in. I almost forgot. There we go. Okay, so a single layer of genuine elk hide. Again, we're talking about probably around 4 to 5 ounces of leather and an absolute perfect stitch all the way down. I don't have the best angle here, but matter of fact, I'm going to change that angle just a little bit. That's a better angle. I have to sometimes think in relation to how I have the camera pointing. So let's try that one more time. Now you can really see that stitch definition, the spacing, the formation. Absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. And again, look at the thickness of that from the top. You kind of see it right there. Okay, so let me come out in the shot a little bit. We'll turn it around and take a look at the lock stitch. A single layer of genuine elk hide, which would kill some machines, to include vintage. And this 301 went through it with so much ease. I'm trying to get this to lay in such a way that we can actually see the stitching. It's trying to curl a little bit. I may have to get my Rolls Royce out to hold it in place. There we go. I think that's pretty good. And there's a little bit of a nap on the genuine elk hide, so it sometimes masks the stitch just a little bit, but that's a gorgeous lock stitch as well through this very thick layer of chemically treated genuine elk hide. That's exactly what we want to see right there. That is absolutely picture perfect. Absolutely spectacular. Spectacular. Just like the top stitch as well. So I'm going to give this a definite pass. I'll throw this elk hide to the rear with that leather suede stuff, which is a real slippery, nasty material that I may not use very much again because it really tends to distort stitches no matter how meticulously that machine has been prepared. Alright, let me wipe this bed off a little bit real quick and we'll move on to the next sew off. Well, I hope all of you are doing well. We looked like we were coming out the end of the tunnel with Corona. Numbers were dropping, and now there's talk of numbers increasing again in different parts of the country, to include in my neck of the woods. So it just seems like we have, you know, good cycles and bad cycles, and yeah, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. It's a process. Definitely a process. All right, a little bit more music, and then we will sew an upholstery material that I have not sewn before on this channel. So Jazz Mango is what we just played. Now we're going to put on Jazz Apricot. And we've done these songs before, but I think they're awesome. Okay, so this is upholstery material. It's used in, my screen pointing the wrong way. It's used in furniture coverings and other things like that, Davenports, however you would need to use it. You can look at the back here, and if you could feel it, it's got kind of almost like a glue base to it. This is going to be quite a challenge, I think. And we're not going to do one layer, we're going to try to do two. So let's see how this 301 does with a task like this. It's not going to be easy. Not going to be easy at all. Alright, presser foot is down, and I'm really going to have to kind of guide this stuff because it's real springy and poppy and it's trying to go all over the place. Okay, keep your fingers and toes crossed. First time I'm sewing this material on a Premiere. So hopefully it goes well. Alright, here we go. I intentionally took that slow. Because this is some intense stuff. Very, very intense stuff. But boy, oh boy, did we do well in the stitching. Other than me sewing a little bit crooked, it turned out really, really well. Okay, let me clip these threads. And I'm going to zoom in on this and kind of pull it back so you can see the stitching. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit hard to do with the way this material, the weave and the fiber of it is going to really, really make it hard to see those stitches. Okay, let me see how I can do this. Set that right there. Try to get a little bit closer than we are right now. Okay, turn my screen around. Okay, and I will do my best to pull this back because I think that's the best way to be able to see this. Where am I? So here's our top stitch. I'm going to kind of pull it back as we go. Beautiful stitching from this 301. Just spectacular stitching. All the way down, start to finish. The formation, the presentation of these stitches is exactly what we want to be seeing. Exactly what we want to be seeing. I get a crick in my neck trying to spin my head around here and watch this on this little screen at the same time as I'm manipulating it with my hands down below. And if any of you have sewn with upholstery material, you already know, especially when it has like a glue back base to this, it's, you know, they basically mix glue into it and it kind of gives it greater strength and rigidity. It is intense stuff to work with. So I'm going to turn it over now. We're going to look at our lock stitch, which is going to be even harder to see. So I'm going to do my best with it. But here you can see the beginning of that stitch line, which is absolutely spectacular. Here it's really, I mean, it's like underneath the weave almost. You can't even see it hardly. Yeah, I'm really pulling it back with a lot of force to try to expose those beautiful stitches. So this is a definite pass. First time I've used this on a channel. I really do kind of like it. So you'll probably see this again. It's an upholstery material. We went through 2 layers of it, a woven side and then also this glue back based side as well, which you know, that's an intense sew off. So definitely 2 thumbs up on that. I'm going to throw that to the rear. And I think the next one we're going to try to do is going to be heavy grade denim. Still deciding how many layers I want to do, as I'm going to pick out a little bit more music for us to play. And then I'll decide how many layers we're going to do. Again, a premiere is not to show the max of what that machine can do. It's just to show the quality of stitching and the versatility of that machine to do a variety of different sew-offs. And that's why I choose a fairly wide scope of materials to work with, because I'm wanting to show that the machine is not limited to just sewing cotton or just canvas or just vinyl. It's able to sew a wide scope of different materials. Okay, so that was Jas Apricot. Now we're going to do Stay Golden. Stay Golden. Okay, I think we're gonna, let me see here, 2, 4. I think I'm gonna do 4 layers of heavy grade denim. You see the thickness of what we're gonna be dealing with. We started with 2, I folded it in half, and now we have 4. So I'm gonna try to sew down and around and see how this 301 does with a task as difficult as this. All right, here we go. All right, here we go. Try not to go off the end of the material if I can avoid it. All right, to the finish line. And no, I'm not going to close the box, so don't ask. I think this is probably going to need a little bit of pulling back as well, like the other one, so I'm going to do my best. Where am I? Okay, so this is our top stitch. I'm going to pull it back so you can see these stitches kind of popping through. This is a heavy grade denim, but it has kind of a stretch factor to it. It must be some of those fancy custom jeans or whatever that are designed to be stretchy. So it has, where am I? It has kind of an elasticity to it as well, which makes it a little bit more of a handful for a machine because of that stretch factor. Okay, so let me go over to this top portion where we made our turn. Trying to get the right hand position here. And the right angle. There, I finally got the right angle. You see those stitches popping through. They're absolutely gorgeous. The formation and the presentation of them is spot on. I've got like nothing to grab hold of at the top because it's so close to the edge. Absolutely beautiful stitching. Again, especially being kind of, can you see how I'm kind of stretching that? sewing an elasticy material like this and laying down stitches like this. A definite pass. You can look at the side again of what we just sewed through. That is the thick of thick. So I'm going to throw that to the back as well as a definite pass. And we've already done some thinner materials, but I'm going to go ahead and sew some of this cotton blend. And I think we're going to go ahead and do probably do 2 layers. But you know what? Before I do that, I think I'll actually do some compressed felt. I think we'll do some compressed felt. Let me move that over. All right, I'm going to save this one song I was going to put on. I'm going to save it until last because it's really one of my favorites. Okay, this is called Avant Jazz. Avant Jazz. Here we go. And yes, I have the volume turned down, even though you've had a chance to hear Ebony run quite a bit, and she runs beautifully now. We will still keep the volume down so you can hear her run doing a task like this horrible, outrageous, ridiculous compressed felt. I'm going to go ahead and fold it over once, get us up to 2 layers, and fold it one more time, get us up to 3 layers. And we will see how Ebony does with this. And I'm really going to regulate that speed so I don't break a needle, because this stuff is compressed and woven enough that it can actually snap a needle, even a Schmetz needle. So, all right, keep your fingers crossed. Here we go. I've got a needle, I think, that is dull after all the sewing I did on it. Yep, I'm not liking the look of that at all. I'm not liking the look of that at all. Oh. All right, let me set this compressed felt to the side for just a moment, and I'm going to do some of this this vinyl leather stuff, and we'll see if this needle is still good enough to handle this task. But I think I've really worn this needle down. I did a lot of off-camera sewing with this, and when we get into compressed felt and some of the other materials, you really need to be doing that with a fresh needle. You really do. That song, what did that run, like 20 seconds? 41 seconds. All right, here we go. If I put my foot on the foot controller. All right, and down to the finish. Okay, I'm going to close the box. Although I'll have to do it diagonally. Here we go. All right, let's zoom in on these stitches. I'm kind of disappointed with not feeling like I really should be doing those 3 layers of compressed felt right now with the needle being as worn down as it is. And I'll put in a fresh needle before I ship the machine, obviously, back to Maddy in Florida. But yeah, sometimes you just have to know your boundaries. And sometimes you need to change the needle before the premiere. And you can look at the scaly nature of this material, this vinyl leather type material. Incredibly intense, incredibly intense. Even a single layer of it. And yet, Ebony laid down an absolute perfect stitch. Absolutely perfect. I'm going to go ahead and spin this around. We'll take a look at the lock stitch. I don't have the best angle here, but I think you can make out that stitch line, and especially the vertical one has real good visibility because of the angle that it's facing the camera right now. Absolutely spot on. I sewed close enough to that edge that you can barely see it with those clippers there. But that is absolutely a spot on sew off. I'm really loving the way that's looking. It laid down a stitch that is absolutely brag-worthy on this vinyl leather material. So far we've sewn leather, vinyl, we've sewed heavy grade denim, this stretchy heavy grade denim, 4 layers of that, the upholstery material, 2 layers of that, which is, I mean, that's like commercial grade stuff. And then we also did, excuse me, a single layer of genuine elk hide. I mean, you can see the sew-off pile that we did. I think you can, if I turn my screen around. You can see the sew-off pile that we did. Where am I? Of materials to test and to confirm the sewing ability of Ebony after her spa day at the workshop, and she did a fabulous job. Again, I'm not going to fault her for that compressed felt, because that's really an issue with needing to have a needle that's able to manage a material that's woven like that. And I basically have worn this needle down. I was enjoying sewing on her so much and not hearing that grinding metal to metal sound and just the horrible screeching sound coming out of that motor. And I didn't change out the needle and put a fresh one in, but we still were able to generate all of this on a very worn down needle. So I'm sure that Maddy will be as pleased as punch once I put in a fresh needle and it arrives ready to sew. You know, and then whatever she sews, she's going to have a blast doing it, I'm sure. So I'm going to throw these to the side, and I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up this premiere. I know it's gone a little bit longer, but that's okay. We had a lot that I wanted to cover, a lot we wanted to point out. Like that camera tripod that just will not keep sticking its hand out to trip me. So there is Ebony now, and you've heard her sew. You've heard her, I mean, just blast. And you know what? You really didn't hear her blast completely, because I really did take the sew-offs kind of gingerly. Let's do this as kind of a wrap-up to this, and I can do it with my favorite song, which I will kick in as soon as I do this power test real quick to show you Ebony's machine. Blah! Maddy's machine, Ebony, with a very happy motor. I just cannot get those names right. What is up with that? Maddy, Ebony. One is 3 syllables, one is 2. I mean, what's so hard about that? All right, so I'm going to disengage the clutch. turn my screen around so I can maybe actually see. All right, are you ready? Listen closely. Simulate winding a bobbin. Bobbin tire up against the balance wheel. Here we go. Yeah, baby. That's the way a motor sounds. Ha ha ha! Way to go, Dr. Singer. Yeah, baby. And that's all, baby. That's all. God bless.